it somewhere.
Unless it says it somewhere probably before or after that. Just talking about Joab.
Or it could be 1 Chronicles 20:4-8. I don't know, but I read that literally today. I just don't remember exactly where that was.
I was thinking that was in close proximity to talk about giants.
Yeah, I can.
Hey, John Henry, look at it looking good in a Gator shirt back there. Look at him. I thought you rooted for the. Huh. Did you have a good day? Stay out of the heat? I did not. That's right. I worked with MASH again today on coffee. I miss seeing you in the old brown building. It ain't the same without looking forward to you being there.
It's Lori's fault.
Huh?
Lori's fault we late.
It's Lori's fault? It's always Lori's fault. She ain't sick, is she? Here comes the judge. Here comes the judge. All right, if you want to start turning to Genesis 6, we'll get there in a moment. That come to your house? I don't know what that is. Are they sending me money? I think it's a check for $1 million. Bill, you want it back? You don't need it? I can keep it. I didn't quite beat you on notes, but how many notes, how many pages did you have last time? A lot. Hey, I used to write out my sermons word for word, and I had a 7-page outline. 7 pages. It was word for word. It was a manuscript. It might be a more accurate term. You know how long it took me to preach them 7 pages? About 21 minutes. Yeah, man, you know me. Even when I was first preaching and the nerves were even there even more, and I was even more antsy than I am now, son, I could get through some material. You might as well just strap on your track shoes and get ready to go, because here we were going.
Where's that?
I'm telling you. I remember my first ever Wednesday night invitation. Again, I had at least 2 full pages written up, like 1 minute and 45 seconds. It's like, hey, but as one of my preaching mentors said, I used to stress about my sermons not being long enough. He said, no. He said, the brethren will love you. He said, me going 40, they're going to be doing this. You at 20 minutes, they're going to be going. Just is what it is. All right. Anything in particular we want to make mention of before we jump in? Right into class? I'm chomping at the bit. I'm excited about it.
Judy had her eye surgery.
Eye surgery. I did not heard. She and Alicia, who else was having eye surgery?
My mom.
Your mom. That's it, because Tyler was telling us about that one. How'd that one go?
Far as I know, fine.
Okay.
I took her up there. She
As far as you know. Hey, this is coming from the guy. Can I tell the story? I'm going to tell it anyway. I'm not even going to ask your permission. For those who haven't heard this story, he took his mom to eye surgery today. But this is coming from the fellow who was taking his wife in labor, driving her to Tallahassee, and looked over at her like hard labor, like we was getting there in a hurry, and looked over at his wife in labor and said, I'm kind of tired. You might have to try to keep me awake on the way over here. Is that pretty close?
That's pretty bad.
And did you choke him then, or you needed him to drive? So you,
When we say hard labor, I mean.
like, hey, was that William? Which one was that? It was him. Of course it was Henry. Henry, if you're watching, you know, it's always the problem. That's right. He was trying to, that was a joke.
Take her mind off the pain.
That was a Sheldon S. type deal. You just didn't see through the.
She had her pink card, and she said 5 or 6 times to the nurse, and she said, "Baby, we ain't got time for a pink card. We ain't gonna get you in a room."
No, it's coming.
Carol looked at me and said, "You're on your own."
I'm bowing out. Oh. So let's be mindful of it. I'm going to follow up with Judy and find out how that went. You already heard about it? You're awesome. She drove herself the day after. Or no, 2 days after. Was it Monday? I thought it was Monday.
It was Monday.
And what's today?
Today's Wednesday.
Man, my days are so off. I said, well, anytime, look, surgery, there's something too, as long as it ain't you. I say, when it's you? Your new boss, what?
My new boss's mom.
You have a new boss? I'm so far behind. But you're her new boss's mom.
Her mom is in Chicago and in the hospital. She was going back.
Is it COVID? That's your new boss's mom. Mike Mash's son was having some pretty low, like they thought Sunday they was maybe going to lose him. Like I guess it got pretty bad, but he's doing better now. And he was doing bad enough that now Miss Mash was having some serious issues. So with some blood pressure and just stressing out bad about her youngin. So be mindful. I think all of them are doing better now, but there was some kind of scary times for them. I know they'd appreciate your prayers on their behalf. All right. Anything else before we get? Yeah. He had COVID. She has blood pressure. Stressing. Which she's always ran a little high, but then when you're worried about your baby, then that kind of kicks it into overdrive. Brought it into the local ER twice, and they sent him home with telling him he had double pneumonia and then didn't do anything. No medication, no nothing. So, Sandy, did her husband get it too? All of them got it. Okay. And your bride doing okay? Better? Somebody, I saw a hand. I saw somebody else raise a hand. Could have sworn somebody else had a hand. Going crazy. All right. Mr. John here, can I pick on you to kick us off?
Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for first and foremost your Son and what he done for mankind. Thank you for this opportunity to come and study your word in the middle of the week. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for the desire to come. We ask Heavenly Father, Lord, to then be prepared and ready. Ask Heavenly Father, Lord, our hearts and minds to love you to your word. In Christ's name.
Amen. All right. This was a result of the Genesis 10 study. And then some studying I was doing for that, and I've just gotten to the point that if something kind of scares me, or I don't understand it, or I want to know more about it, then I'm gonna plunge in with both feet. And I'll just tell you, tonight's study, I got one really good application for you, and then I got something where it wrapped a bow and really helped me understand something better about one of God's commands that I understood, but I didn't understand. And tonight's study just made me feel a whole lot better about that. So strap in, old-fashioned Bible study. I'll need multiple readers. Let me ask you before we start, do you believe in giants, that they existed? Kind of hard to deny. Just throwing out just unstudied, unprepared Bible knowledge, what giant stories can you think of from the Bible? What? Are you sure? Yeah, where'd you get that from? Well, my reading says the Nephilim were bigger than what Goliath was.
I read it.
I love that. I love that you read. All right. So Goliath is one, and we've got him like 6 cubits in the span. There's some. Josephus actually talks about Goliath. Josephus actually has a lot to say about giants, believe it or not. Even talking about, if we have time, I'll read one of his quotes about some of the bones even still being around that people went and looked at in Josephus's day. Kind of cool stuff. What other giant stories can you think of, or words that might be associated? You had one, Bill. What was the one that you were thinking of?
I was just trying to remember the reference to a man with 6 fingers or 6 toes or a race of people. I don't remember.
All right, I've got like a bazillion passages written down. I know I read that one, and I don't remember which one it is, but there is a guy, 6 fingers, 6 toes, and he is of the giant family. We may get that in. I'm not going to do all of the ones that I found, but we're going to hit several of them, so that one may end up coming up. That one's there. Can I tell you ahead of time, though, that what we're going to read from Genesis 6 is not, there are other thoughts, okay? So humility, I'm not falling out with anybody about this, but the way I've got it in my brain and all the connections, it makes sense to me. That's what I'm going to give you, but I promise there is a why. It's not just a Bible study for a Bible study's sake. There is a why behind this. Let's just get right to the text. Genesis 6, I want to read 1 through 5. Is that not what I said earlier?
No.
You're giving me a look.
Where's
Where's
the 16?
the 6-fingered man at?
2 Samuel 21, verse
Okay, I had 18 through 21 as one of the passages we're going to read. All right, 2 Samuel 21. Do you have it? Yes, sir.
No,
Are you going to volunteer to read? All right, Genesis 6, 1 through 5. Bill's going to read for us. Genesis 6, 1 through 5.
Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all of whom they choose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually.
So, why does God flood the earth? Wickedness. Wickedness, all we talk about violence and bloodshed was ever, whatever. But is there a possible, I think that's all associated. Do you get some more details on possibly some of that wickedness? What's going on in these opening verses of chapter 6? Even if, without explaining, just in general, what does it say?
Their thoughts was evil on kind of the things that they was thinking all the time. They were desiring all these women that they talked about.
Okay.
It was just continuously. They looked on earthly pleasures.
Okay. So the key question of the text is, who are the sons of men that are looking on with lust and wanting to have babies with these daughters of men? That's the key question of the text. Now, let me give you some of the options that are out there. One is that the sons of God is a reference to the line of Seth. That would be the good line, the righteous line. And then the daughters of women would be the evil women that were part of the line of Cain. What part of my problem with that would be, that means like the unfaithful women were better looking than the righteous women? I mean, like, what's that? It's just, I think the main reason why people go to that is we're trying to take away any mythological or any like tricky even though we're people that believe in a supernatural God, we get kind of squirrely when we see supernatural stuff going on. So that is a prominent option that's out there, is that this is a reference to the sons of Seth, would be the sons of God, and then the daughters of. Another issue why I don't believe in that one. There's only a couple of times that the exact Hebrew term, sons of God, is used. One's here. There's 3 in the book of Job, and 1 in the book of Daniel. Let me give you the book of Daniel 1 first. Nebuchadnezzar sends three kids into the fire, and there's fourth, and what did he say about that fourth one? Didn't I throw 3 in? And who is this fourth? You remember what Nebuchadnezzar said about him, what he looked like?
Like the sun.
Looked like the Son of God, one of the Son of God. That's one phrase. The other 3 times is in the book of Job. Each in chapter 1 in chapter 1, 1 in chapter 2, and then 1 later on, where it talks about where basically God shows up to have a conversation with Satan kind of thing, and the sons of God came with him, a reference to angelic creatures. The last one is in Psalm. Where are you going to find it in? Excuse me, I'm saying Psalm, I mean Job. Job 1:6, Job 2:1. The last one's Job 38:7. We can read that one real quick, but I'll give you it's a reference to angelic creatures. Job 38:7. This is in the series of questions. Basically, where were you, verse 7, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Basically, talk about in creation. Where were you when this was going on? Every reference when the term sons of God is used seems to be an allusion to angels. So if that's true, then what's going on in Genesis 6? Who are these sons of God that are impregnating these women of man or daughters of men? It seems to be a reference to angelic creatures. And one of the results of that is what? This group of Nephilim. And what do you know about those guys? Well, maybe you don't know as much about those guys, so let's track through some passages about them. Go back to Genesis, or actually not back to, but go forward to Genesis 9, 18 and 19. We're going to get a little bit of genealogy stuff, and then into 10. This one's just kind of, I'm just dropping a hint here. Genesis 9:18. Now the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then out of nowhere, you get an extra detail only about Ham. And Ham was the father of Canaan. These 3 were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. Here's the sons of Noah. But oh, by the way, Ham happens to be the father of Canaan. Now that could just be setting you up long term for what does Canaan ring in your brain? I know Canaan's land, we're on our way, but what's the original Canaan? Promised land. What do they have to do before they can take it? Kill the inhabitants. Oh, by the way, when they spy out the land and the inhabitants, why is it that they're a little bit scared? Because we are like grasshoppers in their sight. That's one of the passages we'll read in Numbers. So the promised land that they're going to take, which is Canaan, happens to be full of what type of people? Big people. Why in the world in the middle of night? It's like he gives like a little wink, wink, nod, nod to Ham. Oh, by the way, these are his descendants. What are you going to say, Mr. Billy?
I want to go back all the way to Genesis 4.
Okay.
When Cain slew Abel.
Okay.
And then God run him off.
Okay.
He knew his wife. Where'd she come from? We ain't heard nothing about no other people but Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel.
Sure.
To this point.
That's one of the questions of the ages is who did Cain marry? And, was it one of his sisters that aren't recorded? Like there's a lot, I haven't studied that one enough to give you a confident answer, but that could be a possibility. All right, flip over to 10. And we're going to this is where we studied Sunday. Remember Nimrod? Brandon, you missed Nimrod, but don't you know, I got something waiting for you when it comes to Nimrod. All right. Starting in verse 6, you get the line of Ham, Cush, Canaan is mentioned in verse 6. And then you kind of go through some of these guys. You get Nimrod, the mighty one on the earth, mighty hunter. Like when, his name actually means something about rebellion or rebel, but because he was a killer of men and a killer of animals, it began to be associated with a hunter, like Nimrod before the Lord. And so the story is like, if you yeet a deer like from 400 yards on the run, like Nimrod before the Lord, or the next time you hit a smoke and drive, I'm going to if I'm with you, like Nimrod, before the Lord. All right. He's the one. It's coming. I'm chomping at the bit to play golf with you again for that reason alone. Or if we play with Mike, I'm waiting. All right. I'm waiting. All right. He builds the first city. You get some of his descendants, Assyria, some of these other names. And then I want you to look down at, like, you get all the ites, because this is gonna be one of the big kind of bows that got tied for me. Verse 15. Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite, Amorite, Girgashite, Hivite, Arkite, Sinite, Arvadite. You remember all those ites? If you don't, just the few that you might remember, how do they factor into the story of Israel, all those ites? Good people, bad people. How do they treat Israel? Awful. Let me give you some of these names, what they mean. Nimrod means we shall rebel. I don't have all of them, but just a few of them. Cush means terror. Canaan means trafficker. Verse 13, Laudium, however you pronounce that, means firebrand. Lebahim means blades. Like, can you imagine naming your kid blade? I mean, do you see what's tracking with a lot of these, the meaning of these names? The Jebusite means to trod down. The Arkite means my gnawing, my chewing. Sinites are thorn. Arvadite means to break. And Hamath, I can't even read my own writing, but it's the Hamath of one. And that means enclosure of wrath. Balled up. All of Ham's lineage and all of this lineage of Canaan is names about terror and wrath and murder and all of that. Well, guess what line the Nephilim and the Rephaim, that's the two kind of giant classes. Guess which land they come from? These Canaanites. It's right here with these guys. They're bad people. These are the same people that God has Joshua and Caleb and Daniel. You remember what he once done with them? Utterly destroyed. And so this is one of the bows that got tied for me. You kind of sometimes struggle, like God is commanding, I want you to kill what? Men, women, children. And it's almost like the breach of a breach of war kind of thing that, you go kill the men, but you leave women and children alone. God wanted this group of Canaanites, which includes these Nephilim, and this may be one of the reasons why. To justify, where did this come from? Where did they come from? What started all of that? Genesis 6, angels having sex with women on earth, which created some of these lines. It's an illicit, unlawful sexual act, and the results of that, God says, what do I want done with it? Does that help you? You ever struggle with, like, man, how could God murder women and children? Well, I'm not, but at least a possibility of, that's the reason why.
It said that God cursed, or he cursed, I guess Noah did, Canaan, the son of Canaan.
That's right.
For what happened. So why just Canaan?
That's right. That's right. The one that might be that, and that goes back to remember the walking in and seeing their fathers. That's right. So to me, it just kind of made a little interesting connection to me that this keeps coming up. There's New Testament evidence that this is the right interpretation. New Testament authors speak to something going wrong in Genesis 6 and the reason why God would want to destroy. You can keep a finger here if you want to. We're going to come back. Flip over to 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4. I gave you my one that I still haven't got to my good application from all this, but I did give you point A, one of my big kind of, this may be a good explanation for why God would give a command that otherwise we would struggle with. This one helps, I think, talking about the same reference, and see if you don't see it in the context that flooding the earth was connected to possibly the sexual act that we read about in Genesis 6. 2 Peter 2, let's read 4 through 6. Kevin, you want to do that one for me?
For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of the 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those who afterward would live ungodly, and delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds.
There's connections. There's two pairs. This is about what, basically talking in the context of false teachers, and God will take care of them. He cites two Old Testament examples, two examples with kind of two couplets. God didn't spare angels and didn't spare the ancient world, but saved Noah. So you get like, there's a connection between didn't spare angels and it being connected to Noah. And then the second one was Sodom and Gomorrah. He destroyed them, but saved righteous Lot. Destroyed because what angels didn't spare the ancient world, but saved Noah. Sodom and Gomorrah happens, judges them, but saves righteous Lot. You see the pairings? So that kind of hints to me these angels falling and then God doing something that involved Noah is connected. Well, what possible thing would angels do that would be connected to Noah and God destroying the earth? What do we read in Genesis 6? This might be an explanation of angels sinning and leaving their place, is mentioned in another place. Yeah, Mr. Kevin?
You have Jude 6 and 7.
That's the next. So the follow-up, almost sister passage to 2 Peter 2 is Jude verse 6. And let's go ahead and read 6 and 7 of that. Tyler Cheney, you want to read that one? Jude verse 6 and 7?
I remind you that angels do not stay within the limits of authority God gave them, but left the place where they belong. God has kept them securely chained in prisons of darkness, waiting for the great day of judgment. And don't forget Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighboring towns that are filled with immorality and every kind of sexual perversion. Those cities were destroyed by fire and serve as a warning of the eternal fire of God's judgment.
All right, so you got the angels doing what they did. I didn't point out in Genesis 10, but part of the line of Canaan, verse 19 says, and the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon as you go to Gerar, and then as you go towards Sodom and Gomorrah. Guess who else is part of this Canaanite line? What do you think of when you think of Sodom and Gomorrah? People doing illicit sexual actions. In fact, what were they willing and wanting to do that kind of led to their downfall? Who were they wanting to have sex with? Two angelic visitors. And like, let them come out of your house kind of thing. You see how like some of this stuff is like my brain, like starting like since Monday has been just like, can't wait for Wednesday. Can't wait for Wednesday. Just like racing 1,000 miles per hour. All right, let me go back then now. I think that's New Testament commentary that lends credence to that's what's going on in Genesis chapter 6, that it's fallen angels having sex with women, which is now leading to this giant class that God wants eradicated. Let me just give you a couple other wink, wink, nod, nods. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 3. Oh, let me give you one more New Testament one. Sorry. We don't have to read this one. Do you remember that 1 Corinthians 11 about the head covering, one of the reasons why God wanted the head covered? It says because of the angels. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 10. One of the reasons he asked for that is because of some people think that is a reference to angels look down on this female creation and you girls are all pretty. And so might be part of the reason behind some of that. I don't know that one as much, but I'll just throw that out there as extra. All right, go to Deuteronomy chapter 3, 8 through 11. That was my backdoor way of telling all you girls you're pretty. All right, Deuteronomy 3. Look, if you would, at verses 8 through 11. Bill Hartsfield, you want to read that one? Deuteronomy 3, 8 through 11.
So we took the land of the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, all the way from the Arnon Gorge to Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is called Sirion by the Sidonians, and the Amorites call it.
Freeze, Amorites? Who are they from? That's that line we've been talking about. All right, sorry. Pick up in verse 10 there.
So where did you say?
Read through verse 11.
We had now conquered all the cities on the plateau and all Gilead and Bashan, as far as the towns of Zedekiah and Udrai, which were part of Og's kingdom in Bashan. King Og of Bashan was the last survivor of the giant Rephaites. His bed was made of iron and was more than 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. It can still be seen in the Ammonite city of Rabbah.
All right, so you've got just kind of a wink, wink, nod to this guy. And the Nephilim is kind of the big term. There's a secondary category of these giants, the Rephaim. I think is good luck on pronunciation. I'm just doing the best I can. But the Nephilim and the Rephaim are the kind of the two that we get zeroed in on as this giant class. Here you got a guy whose bed is 13 feet long, big fellow, like kind of pretty good size. Let's look at some other. This is the 2 Samuel 21, 18 through 21. And while we're all there, Holly, do you mind opening to 1 Chronicles 20 and be ready to read 4 through 8? I think that I'm just going to pre-warn you. I think that the Bible we have is inerrant. I do think it's possible that a scribe could make a mistake, and this is one of those places. And you're going to see why I'm saying that in just a second. But because we have 1 Chronicles, it cleans it up for us. All right? But 2 Samuel 21, 18 through 21, and then after this, I'm going to have Holly read 1 Chronicles 20, 4 through 8. All right, so 2 Samuel 21, 18 through 21. Tyler Slaughter, you got that one?
After this, there was another battle against the Philistines that come.
All right, real quick. Philistines, guess which line they come from? Same Canaanite line. Same one all the way back to Genesis 10. All right, sorry.
As a false
Yeah, good luck.
During another battle at God, my aunt, son of Jar, from Bethlehem, killed the brother of Goliath. The handle of his spear was as thick as a weaver's beam. In another battle with the Philistines in Gath, they encountered a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all, who was also a descendant of the giants. But when he defied and taunted Israel, he was killed by Jonathan, the son of David.
All right, and then the last word. These 4 men were born to the giant in Gath and fell by the hand of David and his servants. All right, now, your version cleaned up the problem. In verse 19, at Gob, there was Elhanan, the Bethlehemite. How many of your versions say killed Goliath the Gittite? And then a lot of your versions clean it up by adding the brother of, because that is the accurate. Somehow either Scribble didn't put it in there or whatever, but a lot of your original versions say that this Elhanan killed Goliath. And you're like, well, wait a second. It's pretty clear in 1 Samuel 17 who killed Goliath. Well, 1 Chronicles gives you more details about it. This is 1 Chronicles 20, verses 4 through 8, if you want to follow along.
As thick as the weaver's beam. And another battle with the Philistines at Gath, they encountered a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all, who were all also descendants of the giant. But when he defied and taunted Israel, he was killed by Jonathan, the son of David's brother, Shema. The Philistines were descendants of the giants at Gath, but David and his warriors killed them.
Identical. It's exact same telling of the exact same thing. This one gives you the name of the brother of Goliath, Limhi as his name. So you got David killed a Philistine, then you got Elhanan one, and then you got David's nephew named Jonathan, who also killed somebody that was of the giant class. So you got people warring with giants throughout. We don't need to go through David's one. That one's pretty clear about how big Goliath was, how big his javelin was huge. His head of it was, I don't remember all the detail, but it's a lot. I mean, it's a heavy, big guy with a big, heavy armory, and David kills him with a stone. In the midst of prophecy, something God does. Look at Amos 2 and verse 9. Amos 2 and verse 9. Brando, if you get that one, I'm going to let you have that one if you don't mind. Now, this is God talking about to reassure his people. Verse 1 is, thus says the Lord. God is the one talking about things that he has done in Amos chapter 2 and verse 9.
Yet it was I who destroyed the Amorite before them. So his height was like the height of cedars, and he was strong as the oaks. And he restored his fruit above his root below.
What nationality was the guy that God killed? Where'd they come from? Same class of people. And how big was the guy? How tall was he? Tall as a cedar tree. Pretty good sized feller, right? This is why I kind of I don't know about saying Goliath was, Maybe Goliath was small, but there's some other big fellows around. And God said, I did. Now, maybe there's poetic license and I'm, whatever. But he said, I killed someone who's as tall as the cedars, as strong as the oak. I destroyed his fruit above and his roots. I wiped out his line. That's the fruits and all that. I got rid of this class of people. Numbers 13:33 is where they go in and spy out the land. And that one is worth reading. Numbers 13 and verse 30. Let's actually do 32 and 33. Carol, do you mind doing that one? Numbers 13, 32 and 33.
They gave the children of Israel that before the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is the land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants, the descendants of Enoch came from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight.
It's bad. Now, tie all, yes, sir.
It's bad, but Caleb and Joshua wasn't scared one bit.
That's going to be my last point. You hit the nail on the head. I'll go ahead and give it away. My last point, my big application is, yes, there were giants. Yes, they were huge. Yes, they were ferocious, but men of faith were not scared or intimidated by them. I'm going to give you some specifics here in just a second, but that is the big point. Even the reality of, there was dinosaurs too. You know what I mean? But men of faith were not scared of these ginormous, and when with faith and faith in God, God's the one that takes credit for the victory over the Amorite. What does David say when he goes and fights Goliath? It ain't me. You come to me with a sword and a javelin and a spear. I come to you in the name of the God you've been taunting, big boy. So it ain't me. And he will deliver you. He will deliver you into my hand today. Men of faith were not scared of these giants.
Now, you can't throw Zer out the door. This is what he said.
Oh, brother. He can be wrong, and it's okay. You go ahead and read.
But he's been around a long time. He said, now, the giants was not like Goliath, as Goliath was big. I could picture Goliath as just shaking the ground when he walked.
From the numbers, isn't it like 9 feet tall?
Yes.
By his cubits, he's around 9 feet.
But he said giants can be tall, but they are bullies. They're tyrants. They're very strong and physically strong. That doesn't make them a giant.
I'm gonna read you some possibility. That's Zer's commentary if you're not familiar with him, and I'm familiar with that. But I'm gonna read you some other stuff from guys that are around there. That Josephus literally said you could come and look at the bones of these people who were otherworldly, and that's we'll get to that. You tear up Zer. I've got Zer's commentary, and it's probably got dust on it because I ain't opened it in a while. I'm just throwing that out there. I got it, and I want to read it. I want to read you though, kind of to tie my two bows together. Let me give you my first one about why were they going to be utterly destroyed, or that command. Look at Deuteronomy 20, 17 through 18. I'm going the wrong direction. Deuteronomy 20, 17 through 18 is where kind of the recounting of that command comes. Alicia B., you want to read that one? Deuteronomy 20, 17 and 18. Actually, start in, I'm gonna lie. Do 16 through 18.
16.
Mm-hmm.
Deuteronomy 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you take cities in the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you must kill everyone. You must completely destroy all the people, the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites.
Where do we read about them from? Genesis 10, that table of the nations, that line of Ham with all them bad dudes that come from Nimrod, the guy that's a killer of animals and killer of men, the first guy that builds the Tower of Babel, sets up the Assyrians and the Babylonians. That all comes from this same group of people. All right.
The Lord your God has commanded you to do this, so then they will not be able to teach you to sin against the Lord your God or to do any of the terrible things they do when they worship their gods.
Wipe them out. That group of people, those same names. I don't want to get into because it's not Bible. It's first century writing. You guys know that the Catholic Bible has more books than what we have. The apocrypha or apocryphal books is what they're called. You've got like the first and second Maccabees. Yeah, you're a little more, kind of tell about that revolt. The book of Enoch. The book of Enoch goes into detail, and it's confirmed. Enoch's around like 200 BC. That's 200 years before Christ that he kind of writes a telling of and goes really a lot of detail on what happened in Genesis 6. It's not just that the angels fell and wanted to have sex with the women and have kids, but teaching them certain things that had to do with violence and bloodshed. And that's part of the issue with Nimrod, that hunter, that killer of man that goes back to Cain, who was a killer of man. And then Lamech, his descendant, who's bragging about killing men. It's all these, part of the Nephilim name means fallen ones. The Rephaim, I forgot, it has something to do with, it's all wrapped up in that same distorted minds, sinful minds. There might be some even playing of what these angels taught men. And so that there's a reason why God wants them taken out. It's because of their sin. It's a sexual act, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. It's like paired up in the New Testament. I just thought that part was interesting. That helped me. That helped me kind of come to grips with, I struggled killing women and children. But if this is part of the reason why, where's their seed originating from? An act of sin by angels who didn't keep their proper abode. That gives more kind of, God is just to do what he's trying to do there. Now, let me get to John Henry's application. Any thoughts about that before I run too fast to the cool guys? All right, we were in Numbers 13. Go back to Numbers 13. Let me read you a little bit about what Caleb says there. This is just good reading. And I don't remember this part. Excuse me, Numbers 13, verse 30. I can't remember, but isn't Caleb like old? Or is that later on when he's 80 and says, hey, I'll be the first one to go whip their tail? I think that's later on in his story. This is when he's younger. So that's after the fact. So he might still be a young man. But Caleb, when he's old, I think the Bible says he's like 80. And they haven't fully taken all of the land of Canaan, trying to figure out. And Caleb's like, sign me up, buddy. I'll lead the way. And it still talks about him being vigorous. I mean, like, Caleb's a bad dude. All right? Caleb's a bad dude. That's probably why you named your son after him, right? Just say it. Numbers 13. He doesn't deny that they're big dudes. He doesn't deny that they're grasshoppers. John Henry, read, if you would, verse 30. Just read verse 30.
Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome.
Just so you know, if you peek back, all the people, the Amalekites, Hittites, we're talking about the same ites. That's the land that they spy out. And Caleb doesn't deny, yeah, they're big dudes. But you know what? Nevertheless, let's go. We can do this. No fear. Even though they're ginormous people, there's no fear with God. Amos, God says, look, I'm the one that took him out. That guy that's as tall as the cedars, I not only took him out, I took up all of his posterity. I got rid of his roots. I cut down a tree and got rid of the roots too. I eliminated his line. David versus Goliath, we already talked about. Jonathan, his nephew. In fact, remember those readings in the First Chronicles reading and 2 Samuel? It's not just those two guys. There's multiple men of God, men of faith that are able to conquer and kill these giants, these ferocious guys, these terrors of the world. Abraham. Go to Genesis 14. This is the last one I'll give you. You know, I don't know what your mental picture of Abraham is. I know what mine was. You know, Father Abraham. Old guy, long beard, walking around with a staff. Abraham is a bad dude. Look at Genesis 14. There is a war of nations going on amongst these kings, and guess what line all these kings are from? It's like giants attacking giants and seeing which giant comes out in there. And in the process of these giants warring and doing all their stuff, Lot gets taken captive. Y'all remember some of this? Genesis 14. You got to get this rebellion in verse 4. By the way, verse 2, the war was with Bera, king of Sodom. We know where Sodom is. We know where they came from. And I can't even pronounce that dude with a capital C name. Kind of looks like chameleon, like whatever. You see what I'm talking about, that name? You want to take a stab at it? Yeah, however, and he came and attacked, verse 5, the Rephaim. The Rephaim was the one mentioned with Og, whose bed was 13 feet long. That's the giant class. So you got all the war of all the people, the Emim, and all these Ems and Ites going on. And the Amalekites are mentioned in verse 7. The Amorites are mentioned in verse 7. The king of Sodom and Gomorrah is mentioned in verse 8. It's all these big, ferocious line of people warring with each other. In the midst of that, verse 12, they also took Lot, Abram's brother, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there's a guy who escapes in verse 13 and comes and tells Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the terebinth trees of Mamre, the Amorite brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner. They were allies with Abram. Now, verse 14, when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed himself with 318 trained servants. Y'all seen that movie 300? That's more the mentality of who you need to think the bad king. These are kings trying to see who's the top king. The top king wins. And you know what Abram does? I'm going to take about 318 dudes, and we're going to go get my nephew back. You know what I mean? Like, this is, he's a bad cat. And so he trained servants who were born in his own house. He went in pursuit of them as far as Dan, verse 15. He divided his forces against them by night, and he as his servants attacked them and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. So he brought back all the goods and also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. The kings of Sodom go out to meet him at the valley, and this is where Melchizedek kind of honors him there, whatever. I'm just telling you, people of faith weren't scared of these giants. Now, you're going to guess what my application is going to be? When you face giant problems, giant stresses, ferocious, terrorizing people, because that seems to be the way our world's going. You can't even talk about mask or no mask, vaccinated or not vaccinated, without people becoming ferocious. Talk about politics. We are losing the ability to talk rationally and have any common sense. But people of faith rise above all that. They're not scared of ferocious people. They're not scared of big problems as long as they know they've got God on their side.
We're talking about Caleb. I read on a little farther than we were at in Numbers 14.
Okay.
This is Caleb. He says to people, this is after, they've had to talk about how big people are and we can't take them and we're grasshoppers. He says, don't rebel against the Lord. Don't be afraid of the people of the land. They are only helpless prey to us. Helpless prey. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us.
Ooh, that's good. But they're giants, Bill. They're huge. They're ferocious. They're terrorizing. They're from Nimrod, mighty hunter before the Lord. And he says they're what? Helpless prey. Easy. Caleb's going, this is easy pickings, boys. They have no protection. What do they not have?
Lord.
Woo! John Henry, what are you going to say?
And because they wouldn't listen to those two men, they got to walk around for 40 years.
That's right. And all of them died,
Except
except for those two, and then the ones that were under the age of 18 to 20, somewhere around in there.
two men trying to what's that?
And oh, by the way, why it goes bad for Israel in the days of Joshua after Moses is because they didn't fulfill the command to do what God said. If we'd have wiped them all the way out, like God told us to, and maybe they were struggling with that. How do we justify doing this? And maybe, I would think they would know the story better than we do. They were that closely connected to it. If they would have listened to what you read Joshua 1 and read Joshua 2, the whole reason it goes bad for them is they don't fulfill the command that's repeated in Deuteronomy for us. And there was a reason why God wanted them eliminated.
They didn't want to kill the people and the beasts and
Everything. Don't take nothing from these people.
See, that's why human is done ever since time began. They didn't completely fulfill God's command.
That's it.
Even with Saul, he started out, pretty close, and then he drifted back to the people. Oh, let's save this him.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then gets called on it. What does he do?
Yep.
The people took it. Does that remind you of anybody? Somebody getting caught in the moment and then blaming it. Who does that remind you of? Well, I was going to say, you're right. Adam, the woman you gave me, she did it. I think those are like little links to take us back to man ain't changed all that. And why did it go wrong in the first place? Them wanting to be like God, them wanting to be wise, like they were already like God. They were naked and unashamed and like pure, vulnerable fellowship, like with each other and God walking with it. And that wasn't, they had to be their own God. They had to reach for their own power. What about these angels? Got tired of being subservient. And so now we're going to go do our own thing. I don't want to go into it because it's not Bible, but just so you know about part of the reason possibly destroying animals and everything else, you get into like possibly where some occult type stuff and merging of animal type stuff, whatever, and destroy all of it. There's some interesting stuff that Josephus and Enoch and some other people have on some of that. There's a reason why God behind God. We don't always know what the reason why behind God's command is. What we just need to do in simple trusting faith is do what he tells us to do. And when we don't, there's ramifications that we see.
He told them here not to, in Genesis 6, he told Seth and Cain not to
Don't even marry with that group over there. Leave Ham's bunch alone.
But they did anyway.
But they did anyway. So, and that may be where Cain gets his wife from. I don't know. I think he married one of his sisters. That's just my opinion. I don't think we get told about all of the descendants of Adam and Eve. But that's just me. I don't know. Or he got some desert creature. I don't know. All right. Any closing kind of thoughts or applications about the giants? You believe in giants? Scared of them? I mean, we ain't seen them in our day, but if you're people of faith, you have to be scared of them anyway. Fascinating. Is this interesting to y'all, or am I like just Bible nerd all on my own here? This one was like, it just tied a lot of stuff that like the more I read and like we rush through. Here's the problem. And we study the Old Testament when we're in children's Bible classes. We get the big stories with like the children type application, but man, you go back and read with adult eyes and there's some, can I just say this is my last thing. How many of y'all decorated your kids' nursery and Noah's Ark? Oh, the animals and the rainbow. Isn't this beautiful? What is the story of Noah's Ark about? Death, judgment, all of their thoughts were on evil. A sexual act that started with angels and women that God has to wipe out. Ooh, let's decorate our children's room in Noah's Ark and the rainbows. You're exact. I'm teasing. I'm teasing a little, but are you guilty? Are you one of them? Okay. They're the promise. It's the rainbow promise. We're taking back the rainbow. I just think it's funny that we're celebrating death with our children.
Talk about Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Canaan being descendants of Ham, and all these horrible people that are descendants of Ham and Canaan. And my brain was trying to remember, are the sons and daughters of Noah referred to as righteous people, or were they saved because
of their fathers? You know, that's a great question.
I looked at a couple of places while we were talking here, and I never saw anything about them being righteous. Noah, yes, but not them. But what makes me think about that is if they were righteous, wow, how far did they fall? You know, from the time of the flood to the kinds of kids they raised.
Well, it didn't take long because the incident that got mentioned earlier, they're barely off the boat. He builds a garden. He gets drunk on the thing of his garden, which is kind of a reference back to Genesis about something going wrong in a garden, taking of the fruit. And, you know, the son comes in and basically takes advantage. And there's a lot of kind of questions about exactly what that means to look upon his nakedness. And some people see a sexual act in that and others don't. And I'm not going to get into all that, whatever. It wouldn't be outside the realm. You think about Sodom and Gomorrah is from that, you know, all kinds of questions about exactly what went down there. At least taking advantage of his dignity there in some way. I mean, it's just all, one of the things I was reading about this is like, it made, you know, the descendants of the Nephilim and Enoch and all that, it may not even been through Noah and his sons, but where'd they get their wives from? You know, there was some little bit of talk I was reading on some of that, but I don't know. It doesn't matter. I think your point's spot on. Noah was a preacher of righteousness. God knew he needed multiple families to help populate the earth, and that was the point of Genesis 9. All of the world is populated through those children. It's interesting stuff. But doesn't that connect like the story of the Bible, figuring out like all those ites and, you know, and all, where'd they come from and why they bug Israel all the way through. And it all goes back to even before all that, even before Abraham on some of that stuff. So Bible's fascinating, y'all, man. I just thank you for joining me in my Bible nerd out, as we like to call it. But
God put his people right in the middle of all of them.
That's it. To be beacons. So you got wheat and tares growing together at all times. All right, I'm content closing there. Any other it's still coming. It's coming. Can't wait.
I'm just gonna black digit my job every time.
First time Henry kills one, thinking he walks in and he's all proud. Your dad, first time he comes home with a deer on the back of a gator or something like that, like Nimrod before the Lord, make sure he get it. No, wait till you slide tackle the next dude. Guess what's going to get yelled from the sideline? Don't get card. Like Nimrod. I'm going to be calling you Nimrod. You're like, why are you calling your son a Nimrod in front of all these people? For those who weren't here Sunday, can I just, Nimrod doesn't mean what it meant in Bible times about being mighty hunter before the Lord. And I explained to those for those that weren't with us, that came from Bugs Bunny calling Elmer Fudd Nimrod, like a incompetent hunter or whatever. So it's kind of like the payback of that. His name, this violent, treacherous guy, thanks to Looney Tunes, his name becomes what it ought to be is, you're a goofball hunter. So that's where Nimrod comes from. All right, anything we want to mention or before we close or anything like that? Nothing? Last chance. Bill Blue, you want to close us with a word of prayer? Do you mind doing that?
Father in heaven, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for the blessings you've given us. We pray, Father, that you be with those of our number who are in need of our prayers. We thank you for those who are recovering from successful procedures. We pray, Father, that you would always give us strength, always give us spirit, always remind us that we're capable of overcoming our obstacles if we do it through you. Please be with us as we leave. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Hey, you just need to consult me about who you're reading now. Officer.
So there are things we'll never know, and it really doesn't matter now, especially with everything about talking about men of faith, David killing the giant. Why do you think David picked up 5 sons?
I don't know. I don't know if I've ever even read why.
Maybe
Why
that's
5?
all that would fit in his story.
So why not just one?
Right.
I don't know. The first one killed him, didn't it?
Well, he might have been nervous, thought he brought with it.
I mean, he had such faith and confidence, but
Right.
but that's a great question of if he has
Why you put 5 bullets in your gun instead of
just the one, that's being prepared, I guess. I don't know. It's a
I
good
bought
question.
7 in mine. Don't it hold 6? I went 7.
6 in the chamber, or 1 in the chamber and 6 in the clip.
Some of those other books
Enoch is a lot of the Watchers and all that stuff.
were read by the church, but they weren't considered good enough to read in the church.
That's right.
In other words, it wasn't unacceptable to read them to get whatever you can get out of them, but they didn't think of them as
They put them on the same par as being
right
of God kind of thing, maybe historical.
But what I was looking for and I couldn't find is some people believe there's a couple of allusions to Enoch.
Enoch and 2 Peter
Hi,
and
Joe.
Jude both quote Enoch.
Yes.
They both part of what they're thinking there. I was reading some of that today. That Enoch gets quoted in Peter, both, and because some people think that Jude kind of borrowed from Peter, blah blah blah. That's why they're almost identical sections, and
Right.
Enoch is quoted
I was looking for
in
that.
both. That's kind of like the same thing when Paul says something about Cretans are liars. He's quoting some document of the day or something like that. And that. So here's what Josephus said in Antiquities of the Jews. Is that for which reason they removed their camp to Hebron, and when they had taken it, they slew all the inhabitants. There were till then left the race of the giants, who had bodies so large and countenances so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. The bones of these men are still shown to this very day, unlike to any credible relations of other men. So Josephus is saying, if you want to see bones of giants, there's still, in his day and time, there was still some around that you could go look at, which I know he's not God and he's not inspired, whatever, but
No,
he had a lot to say about
but if
giants.
you believe in a young earth, that would make sense.
That's right. Well, like I said, I didn't want to go to the mystical, but like the occult, and some of what's believed is that the angels doing what they did. Like Enoch gets into this watcher group. You know, they basically did this experiment with angels and women, and then like word gets back to Michael, and he's like, and another like they get destroyed so bad, they get punished so bad that basically it's like no other angel will dare do what those angels did because of the punishment that God afflicted upon them. But he gets into like stuff about them, like so they couldn't impregnate women anymore, but like they were messing around with like they were looking for bodies to inhabit, and so they inhabited like animals, and that's why you get like the what's that half goat half man thing called sitar, and there's even like a reference in scripture about like he killed a lion, something like a lion man, and you go back to like the Hammurabi's thing, and it's got a picture of a half lion. There's a possibility that there might be some satanic type demonic
That's the
stuff.
reason why I've always believed that part of what's going on in the whole scheme of things is Satan trying to convince God
That's right.
that he can't create somebody like us that will never see him, but yet not have him.
That's the Job experiment.
But choose to follow him nonetheless.
That's right.
And
It is an interesting. The angels are there watching when all that debate's going on. Everybody thinks Job is the oldest book we have.
But now the angels were in his presence, have all these abilities we don't have, and they didn't.
So I do. Well, and one of the things that came up, a counterpoint to this, is that Jesus said in Matthew that angels can't get married. Well, and then the rebut to that is that's talking about after the resurrection, the angels in heaven. We're going to be like the angels, not getting married. Well, that's the angels in heaven. What did the angels in Genesis 6 and Jude and Peter do? They left. So yeah, those angels don't, and we're not going to, but these angels did. And like the angel visitors to Lot, they took on human form and they wanted to have sex with them. You know what I mean? They were obviously had the anatomy of human beings that they, it's interesting.
That makes the question then, so they come to Earth in human form.
Like the chains of Peter and Jude say they get chains of punishment.
Their own power. I mean, that's what I think. I think
You talk about the why. Yeah, you're answering the why of why they would do that. What happened? Yeah, they're trying to set up their own.
So they come to Earth and take on the form of man.
They try to basically they're gonna do like God and create our own.
They're gonna be their own God.
I mean, but did they die? I think that's where Peter and Jude are alluding to. They got put in these chains and at least wiped out the angels that did that, but obviously that seed, that remnant of the Nephilim and the Rephaim, it stuck around for a little while until there's a couple of references we read tonight about he was the last of the giants, or he was the, eventually that seed died off.
Were not the angels.
They were, I think, and that's debate. That's what I think. But I've read some stuff today that you could read Genesis 6 that the Nephilim were the men of old, like they'd been around even before Genesis 6. And then you get into some stuff I read about. There may be possible multiple times angels did this, but
like going back to what Billy said, there's a theory about Adam and Eve.
Yeah, where they came from.
That God created, you got a Genesis 1, you got a Genesis 2. Mm-hmm. And Adam means man. It doesn't necessarily mean Steve or Greg.
Right.
Okay.
Human, basically. The modern day interpretation would be human.
And that there's a theory that Adam and Eve were two particular people that God called out of a race of people he already created. Kind of like Abram.
Well, I hadn't heard that one.
You never know.
I don't know that. I mean, I'm just saying that maybe it's coincidental because I just heard that this week.
When God created Adam and Eve, what did he tell them to start off with?
Well, That's it.
replaced the earth. Right. We never heard how long it was.
Between, that's right.
to-
There could have been a lot of other kids
See,
before.
Cain and Abel come along after sin.
That's it.
Come into
That's it.
and how many children did Adam and Eve have prior to that?
Or even after. That's right.
And where did they go?
And age doesn't seem to matter in some of the, when they're living all those years or whatever. So that's like kind of that question of where Cain get his wife from. It could have been one of the previous. It could have been one of the ones. I mean, obviously you had to get one somewhere. But I don't have a good answer to that one. It wouldn't shock you that one of the other people deserted and went after him. You know what I mean? That wouldn't be outside the. I mean, that's a hard thing to contemplate, anyways. Brothers and sisters having to do that to populate the earth, but it happens again to Noah. That's how it goes. What you reading?
I was just looking to see how the Genesis account referred to Adam. Talking about 2 years ago, I was looking to see if he was referred to as the first man, because I could remember if it is or not.
It just seems that with his name meaning human, that's kind of, we have the first. Well, doesn't Romans mention the first man and then the last Adam? Romans 5, like the first man or first Adam, and then you got the second Adam, but that may just be, who knows?
It may just be memory bias. I still see it as Adam
That's
and
it.
Eve.
That's
I
it.
still see it that way, but it answers more questions if you look at the Hebrew way of looking at it.
It just, man, you can't. I don't want to dig so far that I lose my way, but man, there's just some
Nah.
good stuff. Like this one connected some dots for me today. It helped me something I struggled with about killing men and women and children. If it was, would you even hesitate to say, man, you know what? Everybody in Sodom and Gomorrah needed to be wiped out. Would you? I mean, like knowing what was going on there and how it had been raised, they're willing to rape angels. Now I have said, but rape angels. When it doesn't bother us what happens to Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, if you find out that these ites and these Nephilim and all these sons of the sexual sin.
That goes right back to what God told us to do. Don't
Let me turn this on.
listen to what He said in His commandments.
It's for a reason.
And do all